Guns of Icarus is the perfect example of a unique idea with poor execution. A player base that was so excited about this entirely new look at multiplayer games, but unfortunately it never came to be. So, what happened to Guns of Icarus? Why did it really fail? First, let's take a look at what the game actually was. In short, Guns of Icarus was a PvP airship title. Players would get to fly huge airships along with 3 other crew members, each with their own classes. These classes include repairing, shooting, and of course driving the goddamn thing. Working with your fellow crews to maintain and fight with your ship. There are a number of ships to choose from. For example, the Squid, which was the fastest, but it doesn't have the heaviest weapons. Or if you prefer a heavier tank-like airship, you go for the Galleon. It's very slow, but has access to 4 heavy weapons capable of destroying ships in seconds. When the game was released, it was pretty popular because it was advertised as this steampunk unique experience. But what actually happened coming up to its release? Well, on the 23rd of December 2011, Guns of Icarus launched into Kickstarter. They had a project that wanted to raise $10,000 to help partially fund development. It surpassed that amount, reaching $35,000, ending on the 21st of February 2012. Following the completion of the fundraising campaign, they announced the game would enter closed beta on the 10th of April 2012 and officially releasing on the 29th of October that year. The reception of the game was average to mixed reviews, sites like Metacritic giving it 64 out of 100. On Steam, there was a similar view as well, with the most recent reviews at 76%, whilst all reviews are at 91%. The game also had a large backing on the YouTube scene. YouTubers such as the Yogscast and Total Biscuit came out playing this title. It was the perfect party experience, having crew members fighting on the same ships, all with different roles, some being good and leveling up as the captain, driving through the mountains and the mist whilst taking the gunners to the positions to take down the enemy. Gunners being able to use things like grappling hooks, firing rockets and flamethrowers when getting up close, popping different parts like the balloons or the hull, taking out the weapons, the guns and the engines, where the repair people had to go around and find each individual part to get back up and running. But if the hull goes down, everything goes wrong, and that's the end of your ship, having to then respawn and helping your teammates out once again with your new Galleon. Of course, there were different game modes, having 1v1 ships or having multiple ships on the same side doing tag teams, and it was very popular on YouTube for these very reasons. Being able to get groups of people in, and it was a hell of a lot of fun if you got the right people around. So with all this backing the game, what were the reasons behind its failure? Team or crew-based games were very popular at this current time. I mean, take a look at Sea of Thieves, Last Oasis, even Black Wake to some extent. On the side note, Black Wake has only just released. Think about that for a second. Each one of them, though, having their own unique gameplay and selling point. The Last Oasis, for example, showing off walkers in the desert, being able to put ballistas and catapults and building your own behemoths, swinging from ship to ship, or even a game like Sea of Thieves, where you have the possibility for bosses to attack you, sailing around the coasts with your friends, going to islands and disembarking, upgrading your ships and going on new quests together. Yet I think Guns of Icarus was at the start of this big team-based renaissance in the gaming market. On a basic level, it did kind of work well, with having these 3 classes or roles: the captain who would pilot the ship, an engineer who would repair the ship and weapons, and the gunner who would shoot said weapons. There was also a 4th person being able to choose a gunner or an engineer, allowing for a custom ship crew depending on if you wanted to go more attacking or a defensive version. On the surface, the style of the game was also pretty interesting, with the color palette being very watercolored and gritty, with the steampunk style matching the game beautifully. Although the assets themselves now look quite outdated, at the time they were pretty decent. One of the main issues though was the lack of content in the game. This has always been a big thing with multiplayer only titles, having enough content to warrant people coming back. It's all well and good having a fun core base of this party game with controlling ships together and going to war against other factions, but if that's the same thing over and over again, people are eventually going to get bored. It doesn't matter how good that core experience really is. The game didn't have any PvE mode, and there was a lack of game modes in general. Having said all that, the last update that was added to the game was their 8th anniversary on the 22nd of October 2020. Unfortunately, the game was already pretty dead by then. It kind of just added things like hats and small asset things. It was kind of their birthday anniversary update. Unfortunately, though, despite this, as mentioned, the game pretty much has no players. It's completely dead. And I think this was mostly down to the limitations that they set themselves. A multiplayer-only game with pretty much only one trick up its sleeve. Was that trick fun for a while? Yeah, it was, but you can't keep doing the same trick over and over again without any expansion. There are also a lot of issues with frame rate and performance, and this was just due to the engine limitations. The game also got stuck in that multiplayer only cycle. Once people started to get bored of it with the lack of expansions and game modes, people stopped playing. Because it's multiplayer only, people saw that there weren't other people on the game to play with, and then they stopped playing. And the cycle continued. The less people on the servers, the less people wanted to load up the game, and then it ended up dying. So, where is it now? Well, Guns of Icarus wasn't actually the last title in the series. They did try again with Guns of Icarus Alliance. They tried to add a few more things like PvE battles, and there were a few more players. In fact, there are still a couple players playing it right now, but it's still pretty dead. They went down a similar route, and the game ended up dying in a similar way. I think there was so much potential surrounding this title. Guns of Icarus was one of those games that tried something different, and I can't fault the developers for doing that. In a day where everything is about IPs and doing the safe play, doing a sequel to a very popular franchise, originality and uniqueness is something that is few and far between, not just in games, but in general media as well. And Guns of Icarus was part of that 2011-2012 renaissance in gaming. We had massive titles and originality was key. I mean, think of 2012, for example, as a year for gaming. We had Far Cry 3, Borderlands 2, Dishonored, Chivalry Medieval Warfare. All of these titles were pretty unique, and I think Guns of Icarus was just trying to do something new. It's just a shame that it never really had the longevity. It didn't have the legs to keep it going more than a few months, if not a year, and it's kind of sad because of that. I hope something else comes out in the future, something similar along these lines. Team-based games are so much fun, especially when you get a good group together, and it seems now how big YouTube is, they seem to also take off. We've seen that in games like Fall Guys and of course Among Us. Titles that have multiplayer only focuses do very well now. YouTube helps promote them, and Guns of Icarus was in that first wave. Unfortunately, it was back in the day when longevity wasn't all that possible. Small development teams weren't able to get the resources to keep these games running. Now it is much easier with the technology and equipment people have now, but unfortunately it's just too little too late for this unique title. But that's just my opinion on why Guns of Icarus failed. It's always this issue with multiplayer only games, and it's not the first time we've seen it, and I doubt it's going to be the last time. But did you play Guns of Icarus? Did you enjoy it? I absolutely adored this game when it came out. I was sad when I loaded it up a few years ago and saw no one else was playing it, but hey ho, it is what it is. Please let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. But until then, I will see you in the next one.